One of the most overwhelming parts of starting full-time travel is trying to figure out how to handle visas and vaccinations as you travel. Let's tackle those questions this week. Welcome to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. I'm your host, Heather Markell. If you're dreaming of full-time travel or moving abroad, but stuck at the emotional, financial, and logistical challenges, this podcast is for you. I'll help you trade overwhelm for information that gets you from down and stuck to up and going. You can dream about the travel lifestyle, or you can live the travel lifestyle. If you're ready to live it, then let's jump in together. As a full-time traveler, when you're confronted with the ability to go anywhere and you realize, hypothetically, you could stay there as long as you want, you suddenly realize there's actually a time limit on how long you can stay in a country if you don't have a passport or a permanent residency card there. It's one of those things you never have to think about when you just take vacations. So in this episode, I'm going to cover a bunch of considerations to make and how to figure out the visa and vaccination policies as you travel the world. Let's start with vaccines. If you're not already familiar, there are things called travel vaccines. Those are for fighting basic illnesses that you really don't want to get while you're out there enjoying the world. When you're only traveling for vacation and you stay in, say, a fancy hotel or a resort, and probably in a first world country, you don't think about the possibility of getting things like malaria or hepatitis. So before you start traveling, it's important to look into whether you need to be vaccinated and what for. Some good resources to use to do that, at least up to now, because with the changes happening in the US and vaccines, well, these resources maybe will be replaced in the future, but at the moment, there's the World Health Organization, WHO. There's also the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and you can Google both of those and find lots of information. Local embassies for the countries you're traveling to are another great resource. I'd also suggest joining country-specific traveler groups like they have on Facebook, and use those for specific questions or research. You can also look into travel clinics located in the countries you're traveling to see what vaccines and medications they have on hand. And the reason for that is that vaccines and these travel medications are often much less expensive outside of America. So this begs the question, should you get vaccinated? Well, yellow fever, the vaccine, is required to enter certain countries. So you're going to need it if you're planning to go to certain places in Africa or parts of South America. And again, using something like the CDC website is the best way that you can stay informed about this. You'll also be getting when you get your vaccinations, you're going to get this yellow card, and they should put the specific vial number that you got, and then the doctor signs it. I suggest you take a picture of it because those cards fall apart really easily, and if you ever need them to prove that you were vaccinated, trust me, you want to know where it is and be able to pull it up fast. So if you plan on doing more adventurous travel, and mostly that means outside of America and Europe, I was advised that it's a good idea to get a core set of vaccinations such as hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and typhoid. Hep A and Hep B have multiple vaccines. The Hep B, you can make it permanent when I did it, you had to get 3, and now I think you can get 2. So stay on top of your tetanus shots as well, and talk to a travel doctor. Yes, there are actually things called, or people called, travel doctors, and talk to them about where you're going, and they can best advise you on which vaccines you need, and especially with a multiple series one, the time frame. You get dose 1 now, how many months later do you need to get the next one? And this is why it's important to eventually figure out what country you'll be in, because you might have to get a second or third follow-up vaccine dose in a different country from where you got the first one. Now, depending how long you travel full-time, you're also going to need to refresh those vaccinations from time to time. Travel doctors exist around the world. So if you're starting, say, in Europe, I'd get your vaccines there because they're cheaper and possibly easier to come by than in the US. If you're using an expat insurance plan, it's likely they cover many of these vaccines. So look into that so you know the ultimate cost. I spent about $1,200 to redo my vaccines, and my insurance picked up around 80% of the cost. If you intend to be around wildlife, if you're kind of volunteering, or, well, especially if you're volunteering, you'll be around monkeys or wild dogs or things, you may also want to look into the rabies vaccine, which can be very difficult to get in multiple places of the world as an exception. So definitely do your research before committing to any volunteer opportunities like that, and stay informed on where you can get those. Moving on to visas. The biggest thing you need to inform yourself about are the entry and, even more importantly, the exit visa requirements. The exit visa requirement is known as proof of onward travel. I remember when I went to Costa Rica, I knew that I needed to have proof of onward travel within a certain amount of days after my arrival. So I bought a bus ticket. I can't remember if it was to Nicaragua or Panama, but I planned to go there. I just didn't know exactly when, so I bought the bus ticket, which was proof enough for immigration at that time to show that I was planning to leave the country. Clearly, if you're going to an island nation, you might have to book a flight if you're staying for a long time. In 2019, I bought a one-way ticket to Colombia, and I had no idea when I was coming back to the States. At JFK Airport, the staff raised an eyebrow because I have this one-way ticket to Colombia and no return ticket. Looked kind of weird. They questioned me. Now, I had a rough idea of the countries I was going to, so I told them my rough plans, and I offered to book a return ticket if that made them feel better, but they did not insist on my doing that. At least this is back in 2019. Now, usually, something to know is that you have 24 hours to cancel a plane ticket with no fee. So if you ever need to know that, keep that in your back pocket. But I do advise that you check in with your airline before making that booking so that you make sure of that. Another thing that's really important with visas is make sure that you never overstay your welcome. It could mean you are banned from certain countries. And if they have reciprocity, you could be banned from multiple countries. Use your country's government website to find out if citizens from your country require visas or if they automatically get a tourist visa, and also for how long each visa is valid. If you're American, you can use the government travel website. I'll put a link to it in the show notes below. If you have to buy a visa, keep a few things in mind. Typically, you can get them online or in that country's embassy or on arrival at airport. It's depending where in the world you go. Maybe all three options are available, maybe just one, maybe two, so you do need to figure that out. Research how long it takes to get the visa by each method and allow enough time to get it. You can figure that out typically on an embassy website. In other words, let's say you're applying online and it takes a week to get your visa. Clearly, you don't want to wait until the day before your flight there to start your application process. The United Kingdom recently created a visa, the ETA, which you need as an American, which is new. Europe is in the process of creating an ETIAS visa. As of this podcast episode, that's been pushed back to 2026, but you're going to want to stay informed on their website, etias.com. I'll drop that one down below as well, because, yep, as an American, you will need that too. When you are buying a visa and you're researching this information online, be really careful and beware that there are many companies that look like they're an official website to buy you a visa, and they'll charge you 10 times more than the actual official government website. So for example, when I went to New Zealand in 2019 and I was looking at how to get my visa, I saw that I had to pay upwards of $150. And I was like, wow, that's really expensive. And that's when I discovered that in more research, there was an actual official website where it was 19 US dollars. So be aware that there are many third-party companies that are only too delighted to have you pay lots of extra money to them, and you don't need to do it. Visa prices also tend to change depending on various politics between governments. So the price of the visa you see today could change. When I went to Argentina the first time, a visa to Brazil cost $160. They got rid of that fee a few days after I left Iguazu. So realize that tourist visas fluctuate in cost. The other thing to note is there are many different visa types. As a full-time traveler, you're most likely going to take one of two visa types, and that's either a tourist visa, which is just given to you. You don't have to apply for it. Or if available, and actually I should retract that, sorry, you may have to apply for that tourist visa, as I mentioned, with the ETA or the ATIAS visa, but there are many places in the world where you actually just are granted 30 days, 60 days, 90 days just with your passport. There's also a digital nomad visa. So if you have the income to support you and you want to stay somewhere longer, say a year or more, then a digital nomad visa might be the right option for you. It's really important to inform yourself on how long you're allowed to stay and be in touch with immigration if your plans change. When I lived in New Zealand, I learned that if you overstayed, you could be banned not only from there, but also other Commonwealth countries like Australia and the United Kingdom. So this is a really big deal. Another place you don't want to overstay is the Schengen countries. Those are the European Union countries, and the list of them changes and increases. For example, Croatia joined the EU in 2024. There are calculators online that can help you figure this out. I strongly recommend you carefully look into all of the countries that at the moment you're planning your travel comprise the EU, and get one of those calculators. You want to make sure to get this right because you're allowed 90 days in and then 90 days out and then 90 days back in. It's a 90 days in a rolling 180 days. So you can understand that if you're staying, say, 45 days and you want to come back for another 45 later, you need to carefully make sure which 180 days you're in. This is why you want to use the calculator. It's above my head too. So this is something you need to do. Now look, I'm going to stop here because this can get really overwhelming, and I really just wanted to give you a basic overview of vaccinations and visas and how they relate to your full-time travel experience. Now, you have a lot of information here on both, and if you want to learn more of the things that you need to know to get started with full-time travel, make sure to check out my 28-day challenge on how to get started with full-time travel, and I will put the link to that also in the podcast description below. So, hope that this was valuable information for you. Have a great week, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. If you loved it, please leave a review and let us know. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. Check out the show notes for important resources related to this episode, and come visit us at travellifestylecoach.com to learn more great information. If you're ready to get started with the lifestyle, go to moneyfortravelbootcamp.com, where you can learn all the strategies to afford this amazing lifestyle. Talk to you next week.